You're listening to the #1 podcast for nonprofit leaders, getting your nonprofit fully funded. This is the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast. He came up with the idea of, hosting the vision dinner in his own facility, which normally we say, no, we don't usually do that.
Yeah.
But in his case, the facility that they had was a TV studio. I was thinking, if he raised $100,000, that would be pretty good, for a first year dinner.
Right.
Ironically, he had his dinner and then he got sick. And he just kind of dropped off the face of the universe.
Wow.
I was, wanting to check in and see how it went, and he wasn't responding to phone calls. He wasn't returning emails. He was just kind of disappeared. And I was just going, oh no, this must have not went too well.
Yeah.
I finally got in touch with him like 2 weeks later, and he's like, and I'm happy to report that we raised $173,000 on our first ever vision dinner.
That is great.
It just kind of proved that, I mean, this works for even an international online program. Well, welcome to another episode here at the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast. My name is Jason Galasinski, and joining me, my host, Jim Dempsey.
Hey, Jason.
How are you today, Jim?
We're doing just great. Looking forward to hearing some good stories today.
Yeah, and thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Fundraising Masterminds. This week, we are just going to kind of bask in the glory of God's faithfulness. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that we oftentimes share lots of tips, we share lots of ideas, we have great discussions, but this episode is going to be just really focused on telling some stories. We've had some really great, amazing stories over the last year as we've been training different nonprofits, and we just thought it would be really cool to share some of those stories with you guys.
7 stories.
7 stories, and I'm excited to get into this. Real nonprofits that we've been working with over the past year who were struggling at one point in time, and we had the opportunity to work with them. A lot of them have gone through the Perfect Vision Dinner mentorship program, and we just wanted to share, what God is doing in all that. So the first story that I wanted to share is from Brent. He runs a pregnancy center in Newton, Kansas called Heartland PRC. And Jim, the cool thing about Brent was that when he came to us, his organization, I remember this explicitly, that he said, we've been doing vision dinners for 20 to 30 years. They were kind of a smaller PRC, and he worked in kind of an rural area. And he said, I asked him, he was interested in working with us with the Perfect Vision Dinner. And I had asked him, well, share with me some of your past of fundraising efforts. And he's like, oh, well, we've been doing vision dinners, or banquets for 20 years. And I said, well, how much do you raise on a typical banquet? And he said, well, we do okay. We raise about $20,000 a dinner, and that's part of our average. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm thinking, oh, doesn't sound very good.
Right.
But, he didn't know any different.
Right.
He said that was kind of the history of the organization. And then when he got hired as the executive director, he made some changes, and he was able to get it up to 60,000.
Oh, okay.
So he actually doubled. He made some changes and did some things, and so he was pretty proud.
So he looked like a miracle worker.
Yeah,
almost.
I mean, the board was like, "Wow, whatever you're doing,
keep it up.
You've blown the socks off of us, and you're doing a great job." Well, he started listening to our podcast, and he called me up and he said, I took your dinner survey. It's showing that we're operating at 50% capacity. And, I know we've done a lot, but I mean, if we could raise 50% more, like show me how. And he was just kind of an empty book. And I said to him, after assessing his organization, I said, I think we could probably double your income, if you took the vision dinner.
Yeah.
And he basically said, well, sign me up. Let's do it, And he was just a great person to work with because he was an open book,
right, willing to do whatever we asked him to do. Even though he had some good success on his own, he was really willing to just say, "Teach me, just whatever you guys say, I'm going to do." Right,
and that was like he's just the perfect candidate for our course. Followed everything to a T. You remember he showed up at every single weekly call.
Yeah, I do.
Worked faithfully through everything, stayed on track, did everything. For a time, he actually lost a staff worker.
Wow.
Remember that? And,
I do.
He kind of dropped off for a few weeks, and we were thinking, oh no,
did we lose him?
Did we lose him? What happened? And it turned out he was still faithfully watching the recordings and doing everything behind the scenes. And he did his perfect vision dinner in the fall.
Yeah.
And you know how much he raised?
No, I don't.
He raised 231%.
Oh, get out. Oh, man, that's terrific.
So he came in at $149,000.
Oh, man. So it was more than doubled.
It was more than doubled. It ended up being 231% increase.
Unbelievable.
And it was going from, where he was at about 64,000 from his last
Right. Which was double the year before that.
Right.
So if you really took the 30,000 and went all the way out.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible.
It floored the board couldn't believe it. I mean, they were like, hey, we trust you.
Wow.
That was the cool thing about the board was they just trusted him.
Wow.
And, he was like, hey, I think we can learn from these guys. And I told him, I think we can help you. And they took the challenge and were, very rewarded. So that was a very encouraging story to me.
That's great.
And it was a blessing to work with.
Absolutely.
Jim, you had the second story I wanted to share. You had a story from a major donor recently that you thought was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, you never know. Jason, this is probably what I would call the diamond in the rough testimony.
Yeah.
There was this individual who had been giving to a nonprofit organization for a number of years, but his largest gift, he and his wife, the largest gift they ever gave was $1,000.
Yeah.
And they were that was nice. Yeah. Sure. They were by a lot of accounts, they were considered major donors. But this particular couple was invited to a major donor weekend, loved what they heard from the organization, and something must have connected. They finally heard something that resonated with them, and they made not only a commitment, but they gave a gift of $13 million.
Oh, wow.
And that to go from 1,000 to 13 million. And they have made significant $1 million commitments beyond that, multi-million dollar commitments beyond that.
And when you were sharing this story before, you said, a few people that invited them weren't sure if he was even qualified.
To make the major donor event. That's exactly right. Wow. Yeah. So
what is that? What did you learn from that story?
Well, like I said early on, the diamond in the rough. You never take for granted the capacity and capability of people. I don't think that organization did their homework well enough to be able to identify, and as a result, they almost missed that tremendous diamond in the rough.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. The third story I wanted to share was a man named Brian. He runs a Bible school, and it's an online Bible college, and mostly geared towards international audiences.
Right.
And when he came to us, and he had never done a vision dinner, he found out about our podcast.
Right.
And started listening to some stuff, and he reached out to us and said, I'm intrigued by this vision dinner thing, but I've never done one before, and I don't even know if it will work for my kind of ministry.
Wow.
Because it's an online ministry to global audiences. So how do you do a vision dinner?
Right.
It's not like you're in a local area, right? Your your constituents are all over the world. So he wasn't really sure if it would work, but he really wanted to try it. Right. And I remember you and I thinking, now this is going to be interesting. We've never done a vision dinner for an online, Bible college.
Yeah.
So we were kind of intrigued if it would work ourselves too.
Right. Yeah.
What was it like working with Brian?
Well, Brian was a very busy individual. I remember that. There were a number of times he couldn't make it because he was traveling overseas. And we talked about the importance that he needed more trained pastors, that so many of the pastors they trained were just 6 months to a year ahead of their congregation as far as understanding of the scripture, because they were starting these churches so quickly and training up these pastors, but they needed to get more pastors trained up,
Yep.
and that was the bottom line goal. He needed to get money to be able to scholarship these prospective pastors to come to take classes.
Right. Yeah. We recommend using venues, outside venues. And he came up with this idea, which we normally wouldn't do this, but he came up with the idea of, hosting the vision dinner in his own facility, which normally we say, no, we don't usually do that.
Yeah.
But in his case, the facility that they had was a TV studio. And so his idea, which granted, he was open to, doing it in the hotel, but he said to us in kind of a humble way, what do you think about this idea of us doing the dinner in the studio? And that would enable, like, as people are having the vision dinner with us, it's a really nice facility. There's fancy lights and, we can do all these really neat displays, and we can showcase in actual, like, what we actually do, like how we produce this content.
Yeah.
And so we kind of hesitantly agreed to that and thought, well, it sounds like a pretty good idea, to have people come in.
Could make it work. Yeah.
We could make it work.
Yeah.
And anyways, in the back of our minds, we were thinking, well, we'll see how this.
A little skeptical, for sure.
I was thinking, well, if you raised 100,000, that would be pretty good,
right.
For a first year dinner.
Right.
He called me, actually, ironically, they had their dinner. Their dinner was one of the later dinners in the fall.
Right. I remember that.
It was one of the last ones. And he had his dinner, and then he got sick. And he just kind of dropped off the face of the universe. Wow. And I remember emailing him, calling him. I was, wanting to check in and see how it went. And he wasn't responding to phone calls. He wasn't returning emails. He was just kind of disappeared. And I was just going, oh no, this must have not went too well. Yeah. And I finally got in touch with him like 2 weeks later, and he's like, apologizing profusely and just, hey, I got really sick and I had this appointment, and, he had actually lost the vision of his eye.
Oh, man.
And, for a time, and was just going through some major health problems. And he said, we learned so much, at the vision dinner, and I'm happy to report that we raised $173,000 on our first ever vision dinner.
That is great.
And he was so overjoyed. Wow. He was like, we couldn't have done this without you.
Wow.
And you guys showed us how to do this, and now we know how to do it.
Right.
We can replicate it for the next year, and I feel even better about doing this going forward.
Wow.
And so that was really encouraging to me.
That is so great.
That it just kind of proved that, I mean, this works for even an international online program.
And even, the most creative one that we had, that was had this year.
I was really encouraged by that one.
Yeah. Boy, that's great.
You got another story for us?
Well, I do. And in fact, it's an exciting story, and the numbers bear just an example of that.
Okay.
This actually comes out of Cru, and this was the campus ministry of Cru.
Okay.
Every year we hold a major donor weekend where we have individuals who, it's a select group, it's that critical few again, and we invite those individuals to a major donor weekend to hear more about. Almost every single person who comes is already helping at some level, but we expose them to a much broader opportunity to give. And we presented a $15 million opportunity for these people to give. Yeah.
Wow.
And to see how much we could raise over a 1 weekend period. Now, we had been, over the last few years, kind of really we were kind of flat in our giving over the last few years. Some of that was COVID related. The number of people who came to the weekend were reduced. This last year, we had an unbelievable program. We held it at the Arizona Biltmore, and if you've ever been to the Arizona Biltmore in Phoenix, Arizona, it's an amazing property. It's beautiful. The place was packed out. It was April, and everything was starting to bloom. It was just a wonderful facility, and we had almost 100 units, so approximately 200 people who were in attendance. We opened up with an individual who shared a little bit about Gen Z. Gen Z is the audience that Campus Crusade, Campus Ministry is focusing in on right now. That's that generation and the uniquenesses of Gen Z. And that even though there's a lot of people that want to write Generation Z off, we don't want to write them off. We think that they have promise and potential. And then the next morning they heard how Crew was going to reach Gen Z and our strategies and our programs. And then we presented to them the opportunity to be involved, but not quite then. We did it just like we do with the Perfect Vision Dinner. We split our appeal. We let them go off and enjoy the afternoon to pray and to see what God had in store for them. They came back that night, heard another effective message from the executive director of the campus ministry, and heard a powerful testimony from an individual who had made significantly large commitments to Crew. That night, we saw over $4 million worth of commitments.
Wow.
And the ability to be able to make a difference. One of the things that the executive director came back the next morning, she presented it so eloquently. And one of the things she likes to do, she's a sports fan. So anytime we have a significant outcome for our events, she always likes to put it in perspective and compare that to the nearest stadium. Where the Arizona Cardinals play can handle somewhere in the neighborhood of 55 to 60,000 people. She was able to report that morning that the giving from that weekend would completely fill that stadium 4 times.
Wow.
With new believers, not just exposures, but new believers.
Wow.
And so that's an exciting perspective to be able to come back. So you can imagine, I'm looking forward to their next conference that will be in Amelia Island, Florida this April.
Wow.
So it's one of those things that I can't
really
wait
exciting.
to see what God does.
Yeah. That's cool. And we got one more story we wanted to share, another dinner story.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to give you a threefer because I'm going to look back at what is my 3 best dinners over the last year.
Okay.
The ones, and when I say best, the ones that encouraged me, that inspired me the most, and it just really was a tremendous blessing. I'm going to start 2 years prior to, though, as a result of you connecting me with someone. There was a Christian school in Nashville, Tennessee that decided to do their first dinner and had, I won't get into details for theirs, but their first dinner to have 250 people and to raise over $100,000 was pretty remarkable for them. Well, they opened up the doors for 2 other Christian schools in their same network, one in Orlando, Florida, and one in Dayton, Ohio. And both dinners just were incredible from the standpoint of them following the model exactly the way it needed to be followed.
Yeah.
The first dinner was on a Friday night, and that was in Dayton, Ohio. And registrants, that facility maxed out at 500 people. They had 510 people registered.
Wow.
You can imagine the leadership was sweating it out. Were they going to have enough meals and enough space?
Yeah.
Well, fortunately, with the no-show rate, they had a little under 500. But Jason, I'm happy to report with their first year dinner, they raised $260,000 with their first dinner.
That's amazing.
It blew everyone away.
Yeah.
And
well, it's like we usually say, like the average, our minimum goal that we try to shoot for is between 80 and 100,000.
Exactly.
And to raise 200,000 or more than 200,000 is more than double what we expect.
That's
for
right.
Our first year dinner.
That's right.
But we know that it's possible.
It is absolutely.
We've seen crazy stuff like this before.
And Jason, our numbers too. If we see 250 to 300, we're feeling like that is a pretty solid dinner. And for their first dinner to have over 500 people, is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And so that was one of them. Now the next night we went. It was in Orlando, Florida. And same network school. These individuals, this dinner didn't get quite as many attendees. They had 450 registrants, and they ended up having about 430. Now, the exciting part about this dinner was that they had set a goal of about $103,000. And they said that if we can raise a little bit more than that, we would be able to open up a new library, a new chemistry lab, and a new chapel in our school. But that's going to take us to about $170,000 to $200,000 to be able to achieve all three of those things. So they put that out before people. You want to have an idea of how much they raised? $355,000.
Wow, for a first year.
For a first year dinner.
So they got all three things.
They got all three things. In fact, they were happy to report when they started the school year this year that the students were in a new chapel, taking chem courses in their lab, and had a library. So, how
cool.
powerful was that?
Yeah.
And I'm going to finish with another story, which emotionally I really liked it because it was a little bit different for me.
Yeah.
Because this ministry I had helped since its founding, and in COVID they stopped, and they didn't start up. They did a virtual in 2020, but they didn't do anything in 2021. In 2022, they decided to listen to one of their board members, and they decided to do a different kind of an event than the one that I had encouraged them with. And they had a really good track record of having good numbers of people, and they also
for dinners
for their dinners, yes, had a good track record of having a good number. And when I say that, 500 plus or more every dinner. And that last year, their special event that included multiple locations, multiple food stations, multiple presentations, they ended up having less than 250 people and broke even, didn't even make a dime. Wow. They came back to me this year and they said, Jim, we want to get back to basics. We'd like to try this again. Would you help us start from scratch? I don't even know. And I remember the conversation. One of the directors said to me, I don't even know whether we'll get past 250 people because that's all we maxed at last year. But we'll believe by faith that we can get that many people. Well, they ended up by going back to basics, doing exactly what they needed to do. They had over 600 people registered, and they raised $325,000. Wow. And it was powerful evening.
And probably a good reminder.
A great reminder that you need to get back to basics. And, Jason, I give the leadership a lot of credit because many times when people deviate from the model, they never come back. And they decided we need to go back to basics. And I'm excited because they have gotten a much bigger venue for next year, and I think they can max out that venue. So I'm really excited. So this is Jason, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but I want everyone to understand this is the model that works, and this is what we see time and time and time again in our dinner, in our perfect vision dinner strategy.
Yeah, and I just wanted to stress too, if you're listening to this and you're saying, well, these are special people,
isolated situations or whatever.
We actually see this happening all the time.
Absolutely.
This is what we do. We help people raise funds for their organization. And the average that we see typically with the first year vision dinner is around 100,000.
Right.
And so we have people coming to us all the time saying, well, we do a banquet every year and we raise $10,000. How do you, they can't even conceive.
I know 100,000 is
sounds like
reaching a mountain, overcoming a mountain.
And when I tell them that nonchalantly, that's just what we do.
Right.
A lot of them just can't wrap their head around it. They just, they don't believe me.
They think.
And so a lot of it is, I send them a lot of referrals and say, here's some phone numbers and emails and call them up and ask them how they did. And
that's so neat.
And that helps a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you're listening to this and you're thinking, wow, if it worked for them, maybe it'll work for me.
Right.
And the answer is, it will work for you. because we put together this program, this Perfect Vision Dinner mentorship program, specifically for you. We wanted to take the over 40 years of development experience that Jim has had and 20 years of experience with me working with nonprofits. So we combined our efforts, over 60 years of development experience combined, went into
building this curriculum
and creating this mentorship program. The Perfect Vision Dinner is a 20-week program that's designed to walk you through the process of doing everything you need to do from start to finish with templates, scripts.
Right.
We give you the software. We give you everything you need to be successful. And on top of all that, we meet with you on a weekly basis and walk you through the process of how to make it actually work for your organization.
That's so neat.
So we do as much as we can to help you be as successful as possible. And we are seeing great results like what we're sharing today.
That's great.
If you're listening to this and you're saying, wow, how do I get in on this? How do I sign up? Go to our website, fundraisingmasterminds.net. We usually have a window of opportunity where enrollment is open. It's usually only open for a month. So we usually have one in the spring that works towards the fall, and then we have one in the fall that works towards the spring.
Boy.
And if you go to the website and you see that enrollment is open, jump on that. It's a limited availability, but you can get in and you can get trained, and we can help you and we can work with you. Wow. The more that we do it, the more that I just get more and more confident that it works for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's a proven model. We have data that shows that it works. And it's really great to just be able to show people this is how you do it. The more that you can just be an open book like Brent and like Brian and like the ministries that you worked with, the more you can just say, just show me how to do it. They're the ones that have the most success.
Fundraising Masterminds and the Perfect Vision Dinner strategy. Some tremendous success stories.
Yep. So you can check it out. The QR code is on the screen. And if you like this episode, subscribe. We've got lots of great episodes coming out in the future. And let us know how your event did. If you did a gala or a banquet this year, write in the comments below. Tell us your story. How much did you raise? Did you do as well as some of the stories we said, or are you not doing as well? Or how can we help you? Reach out to us in the comments. We'd love to hear your stories. We'd love to just dialogue with you and, have a great conversation.
Jason, there's a quiz. You've got a quiz out there, don't you?
Yeah. We do have a quiz. What it is you can take the survey. It asks 14 questions, and it's really just a way to
evaluate the effectiveness of your current strategy.
Evaluate the effectiveness of your current dinner, and we have a way of knowing just how you answer those questions, how effective your dinner is. So if you do a vision dinner and you're thinking you're doing pretty well, just take the survey and we'll let you know how well.
Maybe you get a high score.
Maybe you get a high score.
Maybe you don't.
We do get quite a few people that take it and they have a high score, but the majority have a lot of room to grow. And that's actually I get a lot of phone calls with people saying, okay,
I thought I'd be higher.
I scored pretty low. Can you tell me why?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can tell you why. So, so I'd love to talk to you about that. But check us out, fundraisingmasterminds.net. And thanks for tuning in on this episode of the Fundraising Masterminds podcast. We will see you next time.
Take care.